Hello and welcome to the Durham Tech Instructional Video Environment, also known as DIVE. My name is Trey Thornton and I will be your guide through this NOS-130 Windows Single User Instructional Video course, which covers resource access within the Windows 7 operating system. So, with so much to cover, let's dive in. Okay, let's begin by going through the expected learning outcomes for this instructional video course. First, we will explore how to manage permissions in Windows 7. Then, we will demonstrate how to share files and folders in Windows 7. And lastly, we will review how to share and manage printers within Windows 7. To be able to access resources in a Windows 7 system, you must have two things: a user account to log into the operating system, and permissions to access certain parts of the system. User accounts are designed to be provided to individual users to distinguish them from other users on the system, while user groups are designed to simplify the administration of multiple users and provide specific permissions. Below are some default user and group accounts that are built into the Windows 7 operating system. Let's try setting up a user account in Windows 7. Okay, we will begin at the Windows 7 desktop. But before we can assign permissions to a user, we need to create a new user and assign the user to a user group. First, we will go to the Start button, select the Control panel, then under User Accounts and Family Safety, select Add or Remove User Accounts. You will then see the Manage Accounts page, where you will need to select Create a New Account. Then, in the Create New Account page, type a name for the user and select whether you want that user to have standard user or administrator permissions, and select Create Account. You will then be brought back to the Manage Accounts page, where you can select the new user. Now, I recommend you assign a password to every user account on a Windows 7 system. So select Create a Password, and then assign a password and select Create Password. Now, majority of the time, setting up a user this way is sufficient. But if you need to assign a user to a user group other than standard user and administrator, or need to perform detailed user management, then you will need to use the Computer Management Console to make those changes. Let me show you how. To begin, select the Start button and right-click Computer in the menu. Then select Manage in the drop-down list, and this will open the Computer Management Console. Now, navigate to the System tree on the left-hand side and find Local Users and Groups under the System Tools, and expand it by selecting the triangle. Now, you will see the Users and Groups folders underneath. Right-click Users, and then click New User. The only field that is required is a username. So type a username and a full name and description if so desired. A password is not required, but as always, I recommend assigning a password to every Windows 7 account for security reasons. And lastly, select any of the additional options that apply and select Create. Then once you select Close, the user will populate in the list. Now that we have a new user account, we can assign him group permissions. In the Computer Management Console, under the Users folder, select the Groups folder, and the screen will populate with all the available user groups on this Windows 7 system. First, I want to check and see which users are in the users group, and check if my new account is in there. So just double-click the users group, and a window will come up with a list of all users that are assigned to the users group, and it looks like my new account is in there. Now, I want to assign my new account to the administrators group. So, I double-click the administrators group, and when the properties window appears, I select the Add button. Then, the Select Users window appears, and I type the name of the user in the text box and select OK. Now, the new user name appears in the list, but it does not take effect until I select OK for the second time. There are very few aspects of the Windows 7 operating system more important than security and access to resources. The security of files and folders and the sharing of folders are so interconnected that talking about one without talking about the other is difficult. File and folder security protects important data on your system by restricting access, while folder sharing enables you to share data so that it can be accessed by other users. In Windows 7, the owner of a file or a folder has the right to allow or deny access to that resource, as do members of the administrator groups and other authorized users. Let's see how this is done. Okay, we will begin at the Windows desktop. For this demonstration, I have a folder here on the desktop that has a test file in it. So I want to begin by navigating to the file in the folder and right-clicking it and selecting Properties in the drop-down list. In the File Properties dialog box, select the Security tab. The Group or Username list shows the users and groups with permissions set for this file. If you select a user or a group, the assigned permissions are shown in the Permissions for Users list. If permissions are shaded, it means that they have been inherited from a parent folder and need to be adjusted at the original resource at which they were created. Equally as important as the basic permissions are the users and groups to which you assign those permissions. If a user or a group whose permissions you want to assign is already selected in the Group or Usernames list on the Security tab, you can modify the assigned permissions by clicking Edit and then using the Allow and Deny columns in the Permissions list. Select checkboxes in the Allow column to add permissions, or clear checkboxes to remove permissions. To expressly forbid a user or a group from using a permission, select the appropriate checkboxes in the Deny column. Also, if users or groups whose permissions you want to assign aren't already available in the Group or Usernames list on the Security tab, you can easily add them. On the Security tab, click Edit. This displays the permissions for the Summary dialog box. In the Permissions for dialog box, click Add to display the Select Users or Groups dialog box. Then, type the name of a user or a user group account in the text box and click Check Names. If a single match is found for the entry, the dialog box is automatically updated and the entry is underlined. Now select OK. You can now configure permissions for each user and group you added by selecting an account name and then allowing or denying access permissions as appropriate. Once you're done, you can close out the Properties dialog box. Also, to adjust the security permissions for a folder, you will perform the exact procedures that you previously performed on the file security permissions, so no need to go through the steps again. Windows 7 supports basic sharing and advanced sharing of folders. With basic sharing, you can share any folder except the root folder of a drive. With advanced sharing, you can share the root folder of a drive in any other folder. The root folders of drives are shared automatically as administrative shares. To share a folder by using basic sharing, follow these steps. First, right-click the folder you want to share, click Share With, and then select Specific People. This will open the file sharing wizard. Type a name or click the arrow to find a user in the list and click the Add button. When you click Add, the selected user or group is added to the name list. You can then configure permissions for each user and group by clicking an account name to display the permission level options and then choosing the appropriate permission level. The only available options for permission levels are Read and Read-Write. Finally, click Share to create the share, and after Windows 7 creates the share and makes it available for use, note the share name. This is the name by which the shared resource can be accessed. Click Done when you have finished. Now, to share a folder using advanced sharing, follow these steps. First, right-click the folder you want to share, and then click Properties. This opens the folder's Properties dialog box. On the Sharing tab, click the Advanced Sharing button. In the Advanced Sharing dialog box, select Share This Folder. Windows sets the share name to the folder name by default. So, either accept the default share name or enter a different name. Next, click the Permissions button and use the Permissions dialog box to configure the permissions for the share, just as you did for file permissions. Lastly, select OK and close all remaining windows. Printers are a very important part of the world today because they are found in homes and businesses and have many different uses. So, with the use of printers comes a need for configuration and management of them. And if you have more than one system that needs to connect to one printer, then you'll need to share that printer in Windows 7. Let's see how that's done. Okay, I'm going to start at the Windows 7 desktop. I already have a printer installed, so I'll use it for this demonstration. First, let's go to the Start button and select Devices and Printers from the menu. Then, on the page that comes up, find the printer that you want to manage and right-click it and select Printing Preferences. These are the settings for this specific type printer according to the drivers that are currently installed. In here you can make modifications as to how the printer will print and at what orientation, quality, and finish. Now, if you go back to the printer and right-click it and select Printer Properties, you will go to the page that has the Windows 7 properties for that printer. On this page, you can perform some initial testing of the printer and configure advanced features. Also, there's a section on here for sharing the printer to other users. Select the Sharing tab, and on the page there's a checkbox to share this printer. Verify that the checkbox is selected and there is a name in the Share Name box. After you have shared the printer, then you can go to the Security tab and set the user permissions for the printer just as you did the security permissions for files and folders. As we come to the end of this instructional video, I'd like to recap the items that were covered. First, we explored how to manage permissions in Windows 7. Then, we demonstrated how to share files and folders in Windows 7. And lastly, we reviewed how to share and manage printers within Windows 7. This concludes this NOS-130 Windows Single User Instructional Video course, which covered resource access within the Windows 7 operating system. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and I hope you enjoyed it.